Chapter 22, Dialogues in Different Voices, perhaps appropriately takes us in a slightly different direction. And what this chapter is wanting to raise as a question and make the reader familiar with it is that many would argue we are now in what's called the postmodern period. If the modern period, with Descartes and his ilk looking for certainty, if that characterised the modern period, that reason and certainty are the most urgent questions of our existence, the postmodern period seems to suggest that that quest in itself is futile. And arguably, the fathers of postmodernism, of two very different characters, one a man of faith, Kierkegaard, a Danish philosopher, and the other Friedrich Nietzsche, a German philosopher, an atheist. In their different ways, both of them disturb the coordinates of certainty with their philosophical and one would almost call existential inquiries into the drama of being human and the drama of the human situation, and the fact that ultimately questions of certainty, the, for want of a better word, sovereignty or rule of reason, was not necessarily the way that people lived their lives, or in fact made decisions, or in fact did anything in particular. The postmodern mind perhaps emerged more clearly from the tradition of existentialism in the 20th century, which ultimately raised a fearful question: is life absurd? Is it actually all meaningless? And of course that question goes clean contrary against the idea that theology is proposing, that life is the opposite of meaningless. It is ultimately meaningful. But the kind of meeting of these two rivers, and the kind of meeting of minds like Kierkegaard and Nietzsche, did yield one thing, which was that what began to be mistrusted were one narrative for everyone that fits everyone. What ultimately came out of this turn towards looking at people's particular situation was that there was knowledge in that particular situation which was different to others. So, for example, oppressed poor people reading the gospel, would they come to the same conclusion as rich people? Women reading the gospel or the scriptures, would they come to the same conclusion as your classic white middle class males? The way in which truth began to be seen as, I hesitate to say this, but something of a social construct, began to form in the minds of many intellectuals in the 20th century, such that what happened in theology was you got different readings of traditional subjects. So it meant you had, a very important turn, you had theologians from the Americas saying the gospel's meaningless unless it makes a difference to the life of the poor. You had women reading the scriptures saying this is not of God if it continues to support patriarchy and oppression of women. You had thinkers from the former colonies saying, how come, in a beautiful image, Desmond Tutu quoted this, how come the white man came along, we had the land and they had the Bible, they gave us the Bible, we ended up with the Bible and they had the land. What was going on in missionary work? Was it entirely a proclamation of the good news? Or was it a spiritualized land grab? Now, if some of those questions annoy you, the people who are posing them would probably be delighted, because they're going to say, this is your first step towards thinking differently, because you've been used to thinking in a certain way. If you're going to truly repent, you're going to have to change your mind. changes the way you look at reality and changes the way you understand what is the case and what needs to change in order to make this world, for want of a better word, more informed by the theology of the Jesus event, which he warned us was going to be an event which would lead to the last becoming first and the first becoming last. It's often been said that good news for the poor is probably going to be bad news for the rich. And it's sometimes said Jesus came to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. This chapter 22, Dialogues in Different Voices, it hopefully will help you to think differently.